morning. Welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio on Market Street in Corning. On the program this morning, we're going to be talking with Josh Feldberg. He was with Big Fox News at 10. If you recall the first episode of Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox, we had Josh scheduled and he got bumped. Time constraint made it so he couldn't be on the program, so I asked him if he wouldn't mind being on the show this morning for just a little look at what they do each night to put on that amazing product of Big Fox News at 10. So that, and if you've never watched that, I highly recommend it. So that's coming up in a little bit. And the big news, bearing the lead here. We have a conceptual budget here in New York State. I like that, conceptual budget. If you read between the lines, it's still, well, we got to fine-tune some things. But after 27 days of delay, we finally have something to look at. This is our level of transparency. We get to see what's maybe in it, because again, they're going to fine-tune it. Maybe see what's in it when they finally vote on it, which they're speculating could be next week. But again, their time frames, their timelines have not been the best in Albany as of late. So we're going to take a look in depth at what is in the budget, what is not in the budget that we all thought might be in the budget. Some of those essentially major issues for New York State residents and what it means for us. We'll talk about that. There's a few things here about the presidential race, if we have a chance to get to that. So plenty to discuss. Let's start right off with the budget, shall we? Governor Hochul did announce late yesterday that this conceptual budget agreement was being put forth. She said a conceptual agreement has been reached. Let's take a look at our screen. That's coming from the New York Post. What was important is not a race to a deadline, she said. We know that she had no problem with extensions, and we're going to find out, and this is really interesting, the New York Times somewhat turned on Hochul, which to you and I might say, well, the New York Times, I mean, they've lost a lot of credibility through the years. It is important when you're talking New York City, right? Governor Hochul looking at a little backlash from the Times, going after who she had help her, in the creation of this budget. We'll talk about that in just a second. Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie released a statement on Thursday night, last night, and said discussions will continue, but he hoped to pass the budget. And it was apparently so late at night, Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins did not comment at that point. State lawmakers are expected to approve a final budget in the upcoming days following the announced agreement. We know that it was announced yesterday, because the former Congressman Joe Semplinsky and I were talking about it on the air, that they have until Tuesday to, even though the extension technically runs out today, it's not an issue, I guess, until Tuesday. The former Congressman, his thought was, and I would have to agree, that maybe the payroll doesn't fall on a day until Tuesday, perhaps. The embattled governor, as the New York Post puts it, succeeded in securing an agreement to nix a state law for serious offenses requiring judges to impose the least restrictive. That's with the quote-unquote bail reform. She got the very least out of this deal. Again, not something I think you and I are going to be very pleased with. She said there are some horrific cases splashed on the front pages of newspapers. Why did she put it that way? Because they want you to believe that crime isn't as bad as it is in New York, that it's just sensationalized by the media. Never mind what you've seen. Never mind how it's affected you, a loved one, friends. There's nothing to see here. It's just the newspapers overreacting. Maybe this is why the Times is turning on her. But I'll continue. Where defense lawyers told judges, follow the least restrictive, that means you have to let this person out. And some of those cases literally shocked the conscience. But Hochul fell short of getting Heastie and Stewart-Cousins to back other changes that criminal defenders warned would have effectively allowed judges to jail anyone who they believe threatened public safety. Of course, using those fear tactics. So we'll take a look at that. Some of the other things in the budget. I have not seen in my research about what is being done about the illegal marijuana stores. that may come up in our discussion when we come back. I'm trying to find out more about that. Again, this is just released last night because there is no transparency in New York State politics, so in Albany specifically. So we'll try to do our best to hash out what we can expect from this budget. But let's first take a break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. We're back here with Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Aiken. We're talking about the New York State budget, the conceptual budget, that is. One of the main talking points, or maybe hitches, was minimum wage, because Governor Hochul wanted to raise it to $17. Many on the far left felt that did not go far enough, wanted it at $21.25. It is going to increase, and beginning next year, it's 50 cents increase until it hits $17. So they have agreed to increase the minimum wage by 50 cents a year beginning next year until it hits $17 for areas north of Westchester County, where the minimum wage is currently $14.20. It will bump up by 80 cents next year and 50 cents a year until it hits $16. So that was a little bit of a compromise that Hochul actually won on, because again, they wanted many of those groups, Rally, New York, and so many others on the far left calling for $21.25. State Senator Jessica Ramos said, "While I'm glad the conversation we started led to a wage increase for New York's working families, I cannot hide my disappointment that the catch-up is so meager." Again, so many people, and we've talked about it nonstop, what would that do to our small businesses? What would that do if we increased minimum wage $21.25? You're looking at businesses not coming into the area, which is already a stretch having them come to the state in general. But the businesses that are already here, small businesses that are already struggling to survive with this horrible inflation, with our poor economy, and hopefully we get a chance to talk about that, but the numbers show just how bad people's faith is in our economy from a new poll coming from Gallup. But we mentioned just quickly, and we do have another break coming up, but we mentioned about bail reform, which takes me to a message we received yesterday. We had former Congressman Joe Semplinsky. Like I said, he was on the program. If you missed it, he spent the full hour with us. It was great. We covered just about everything under the sun. But one of the things we talked about was bail reform. How about this for an idea? This is a two-part text. New York State budget fix. Instead of no cash bail, all bail must be paid and money's kept in state coffers for budget use. I like it. It's a lot better than the plan we got now. Oh, and because I had to, I thank you for this text as well. You really need a 2-hour program of Frankly Speaking. Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. But I thought that's a very good point with bail reform. Because honestly, I know we talk about it a lot here on the program, but there's a reason why Governor Hochul saw the importance of this. Because she can read the tea leaves that New York State residents are not happy with the safety issues right now that have been forced upon us because of bail reform. But let me get a little bit into the weeds here. The budget will eliminate the requirement that judges opt for the, quote, least restrictive standard when considering bail for those accused of violent felonies and certain high-level misdemeanor crimes. That's according to Hochul. The change, Hochul argued, will make it clear to judges that they can set bail in serious cases. So again, this is what we kept sounding the alarm over, that don't get too excited. This is going to be pretty weak. So this is something, don't get me wrong. But this is about the weakest reform that we could have. So now judges can say for the most serious criminals, felonies and high-level misdemeanor crimes, that's when they can have the discretion to decide bail. Think about that. And yet, Governor Hochul taking a victory lap. It gives judges discretion. They need to hold violent criminals accountable while still upholding our commitment to a justice system that is fair and accessible to all. I guess if you want to call this a reform, it is technically on paper a reform. But that's why, again, she was scared, because if you recall, Lee Zeldin did a great job, came very close. And one of the reasons he did so well is he tied Governor Hochul into this soft on crime approach. And really, this just reiterates how soft on crime we actually are when reform is, hey, judges, if you want to have discretion on bail, but it's only for high level misdemeanors and felons. Otherwise, you still have no say. The people that we voted on, these judges. So we are going to talk even more about the budget. I have to take another short break because I'm running just a little bit long. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Stay with us. Okay, we're back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We're talking about the New York State budget. If you would like to weigh in, there is our information. I'd love to hear from you. I cannot find anywhere if anything was done on the illegal marijuana stores. I know they said that was going to be a sticking point, and we talked about it on the program yesterday, but one of the main issues and why it was coming, again, because we're receiving no revenue from these illegal stores, but they were concerned that if it goes to the Department of Taxation or if police get involved in cracking down on these places, that staff members of that place, people that work there, could have bad experiences with that, and that was the sticking point. They're not making that up. That was released, again, all anonymous sources, so take it with a grain of salt, but that's what we learned yesterday. So I cannot find that, but we do know that New York State is going after tobacco. Last week or early this week, I brought to you the story that Governor Hochul was kind of having a soft open on trying to ban tobacco sales altogether in New York, sending out a poll saying, what do you think? What would you feel if we stopped selling tobacco in all of New York? Now think of the revenue that we would lose from that. Also think of what it would do to convenience stores and some smaller markets like in the city. It would be devastating. But you could tell already the writing on the wall is that that's the direction Governor Hochul wants us to go down. So now we have $5.35 cigarette tax. It will be the highest in the nation. And I think almost every year we end up trying to outbeat ourselves and be the highest in the nation. The state's cigarette tax will jump $1. That makes it to $5.35 tax on a pack of cigarettes. Wow. But the budget won't ban all flavored tobacco, which became also a back and forth because menthol became kind of a rallying cry. People wanted, Governor Hochul and others wanted to ban it, outright ban it, and many communities saying we do not agree with that, going back and forth, which is a normal discussion. So it seems like Governor Hochul has caved on that as well, in a good way, I believe. But they will not ban menthol. We'll make sure the tax is in there to discourage the use, which that's such baloney. But you know what they'll do? You'll go to other outlets, media outlets, and you'll see someone being interviewed on the street, and they'll go, oh, I think it's great because it's going to help me quit. Well, no, just quit. You quit and don't punish everybody else that doesn't want to quit. $5.35 a pack. She also argued, as they are wont to do, that it'll help kids stay away from tobacco. Well, first of all, the age is 21, right, to buy a pack of cigarettes. So you're saying younger than that, they're not going to pay that extra dollar tax? That's going to stop young people from smoking? If they're going to make decisions like that, it seems like, especially getting them somehow, quote unquote, illegally, I don't think that $1 is going to make the difference. But that's, of course, a good talking point, and that's how politics work. The measure is actually projected as a result in a small hit to the state's bottom line. With fewer sales of tobacco products, New York could miss out on an estimated $22 million a year because of this increase. Now, what they won't tell you, and I actually had a piece, but it got lost in the shuffle. They're finding all of this illegal cigarette activity in the city. They busted a bunch of people for illegal tax stamps, illegal cigarettes coming in. This is what you're going to have. Just like we're seeing with marijuana, you're going to have a black market for this. So they're just driving smokers into the black market, just like we're seeing with marijuana. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment, of what that what that has actually led to, the consequences of that. Also, just out of just quick noteworthy, Hochul's housing plan was not included, so she lost on that. Again, I don't have an update on the illegal marijuana stores. We'll try to get that for you. So Governor Hochul said the major decisions have been made. There's obviously fine-tuning. This is what I was mentioning earlier. That has to be done. That'll be worked out over the weekend. Again, they're calling it a conceptual agreement. That's what Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie from the Bronx is saying. While there are still some issues we need to discuss with our members, I'm confident we will pass a budget that meets our goals to make New York more affordable, yeah, sounds it, and place our state on a strong path forward. We've got to take a break. We are going to be talking with Josh Feldberg in just a little bit from Big Fox News at 10. I had a chance to sit down with him yesterday. Just talk about Big Fox News, and if you're not aware of it, maybe what to expect. That's going to be just a quick little interview. When we come back, though, I want to talk a few more things here about the New York State budget. So please stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We have some great discussions going. Thank you so much to everybody who are contacting me. I'm actually, in the interest of time, I'm going to read them right now as compared to putting them up on the screen. So thank you. That's how to reach out to me. On the topics we have been discussing. The first one, let's mess with cigarettes, but not worry about opioids because Big Pharma rules. There you go. You know they're going to go after it. Just like they're not going after marijuana. And this is also a good point. I just popped in as well. Make deed theft a crime. Say New York Democrat lawmakers and Attorney General Letitia James. Why isn't it a crime already? That is a very good point. And I saw that in the news just the other day that that's becoming a major issue. How about this? They're using minimum wage to crush small businesses. They are. Ask the politicians that come on your show. I will. They know the true definition of sanity is, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different result. All very good points coming in. Yeah, the budget, there's no surprises here. I guess it's just, well, here, perfect with that last text, because I know you guys were all concerned about this. What was being done for Hollywood? Yes, New York has increased, thank heavens, finally. We finally have a state saver here. It went from $420 million a year. They jumped it to $700 million a year to, I guess, ward off competition from New Jersey and Georgia. Among many other provisions, the budget will increase the size of the film tax credit program as well as raise the credit percentage from 25% to 30%, bringing it in line with rival states. The program will also be extended to 2034, according to a source familiar. There you go. A source familiar with a conceptual agreement. This is where we put our priorities, folks. We wonder why people are leaving in droves. No, we couldn't use incentives as residents. Have to put up with these decisions by Albany. Let's give it to Hollywood. We are going to talk. Well, you know what? I do have a minute. Because Josh Feldberg just spent a little time with me. It's not a very long interview. But I wanted to mention this because I promised I would at the beginning. It's with the New York Times turning on Kathy Hochul. And maybe you're aware of this. This came out the other day. But what the article proves is that Governor Hochul is not up to the job, which I think most of us would consider that obvious from day one. But this is the details. It reported Wednesday, again, the New York Times, that administration policy has largely been in the hands of a Colorado-based wannabe political operative who couldn't be more removed from the concerns of everyday New Yorkers. So you had this, the administration's policy decided or essentially created in the hands of a Colorado-based, essentially nobody. And we learn more about him, actually. When I say nobody, I'm not being insulting. He has one signal. He's a consultant, like so many people are. He has one single significant client. Who is that? Hochul. He lives in a very, very rural Colorado area and occasionally drops by Albany to offer advice. And if you look at the advice according to the New York Post, this is the Post talking about the New York Times article, not to confuse you. But the Post said if you look at the decisions he's made or given to Hochul, they've been remarkably ill-advised. And the second part, 2 weeks, Governor Hochul and company secretly hired outside image polishers, to craft fundamental public policy. So outside image polishers. And to write 2 state of the state messages. Do you know what it cost us as taxpayers? As we mentioned the budget? $2 million for that. Taken together, according to the New York Post, the stories help explain the clueless detachment that led Hochul to within a hair's breadth of an electoral defeat in November, and her obvious inability to govern coherently thereafter. It goes back to the what so many people behind the scenes, again, anonymous sources, saying about her with the micromanagement and not ready for prime time, so to speak. We may have a few other things here about the budget. Please keep those messages coming in. That was great. I love to have you weigh in real time. This is how we do it. We can't take phone calls as of yet, so you can text. You can call, leave a voicemail, but I can't pick up live on the air, but I will be able to hear your voicemail, and you can email me there as well. So we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk with Josh Feldberg for just a moment. He's from Big Fox News at 10, so please stay with us. This is, Frankly Speaking, on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. This is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program, and joining me in the studio, it's Josh Feldberg. Josh, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Frank. I appreciate it.
Last time you were supposed to be on the show was the first episode, and you got cut for time. How did that make you feel?
I'm not going to lie. It hurt a little bit deep down. No, I'm just kidding. It was fine. I understand it, scheduling and all that.
Well, I'm glad that you could be on the program today because I want to talk about Big Fox News at 10, but I also want to talk about you, so we're going to start with you. Tell me about your background.
Well, I'm originally from downstate New York in Rockland County. That's where I grew up most of the time. But I also spent a lot of time in the Adirondacks and Lake Placid. My family moved up there after I graduated high school, so I spent some years up there. Then went to college over in Geneseo.
Oh, very nice.
So I've kind of, world toured the state, and now I'm here.
Well, what brought you here?
A couple of things. Obviously, I found the job here. I thought it was really nice. I had a friend move here as well. They were working for Corning, so it all kind of worked out, having a job and a roommate.
Yeah, and very similar in a way. I mean, I know you're more of a college town, but Corning's not that different from Geneseo.
No, not at all, actually. It's kind of pretty similar. Corning's even a little bit bigger and nicer, which is, even better. But, this is, areas like these are really nice and definitely great places to start.
So when you moved here, you felt right at home?
Yeah, absolutely.
When was it, when you first started out getting your education, that you realized you wanted to be in journalism?
Well, I kind of realized that I wanted to be in definitely in the TV production side really early on. Around 10th grade in high school, we had a TV news class, and I had just got in there, kind of fell in love with it, and then been kind of working my way towards this ever since.
So you want to be more behind the scenes?
I'm kind of either way.
Okay.
I like being on camera and off camera, but I definitely really enjoy the production angle of cameras and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
More.
So when you start, and again, it's Big Fox News at 10, when you start your day to pick a story that you're going to focus on, how do you start that process?
Well, there's a lot of different ways you can go about it.
Mm-hmm.
We get a lot of emails every day that kind of give us some ideas of what to do.
Mm-hmm.
We do a lot of research online and social media, find out, who's doing what, when, and where.
Okay.
And, we just kind of incorporate all of those things and, filter through and find what works best for us that day.
And what drives you daily when you get up in the morning? Because news can be doom and gloom, right? So what drives you in the morning? Just to tell the best news story you can?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for me, part of the reason I love this job so much is that, it's something different every day.
Right.
And being able to bring something different to people every day, the most, exciting or impactful thing I can every day, kind of helps motivate me to do that for myself, but also for our audience.
And it must be fun to work with Maggie Hall. You guys make a great team.
Yeah, absolutely. Me and Maggie actually went to school together in college.
Oh, really?
We had a couple of classes together back at Geneseo. When we showed up here, it was definitely
like
kind of a bit of a
homestay.
homecoming.
Yeah,
and it was
cool.
a funny interaction.
Yeah, I think you guys are doing a wonderful job at Big Fox News at 10, and I think the product really speaks for itself. When you watch it, tell us, for people that are new to it, what is a typical broadcast like of Big Fox News at 10?
So a typical broadcast for Big Fox will be, me and Maggie. We have two, packages, 2 longer stories a day where we, go out, find what's going on, the biggest thing that day. We try to interview real people. That's kind of our big thing at Big Fox is we try to, talk to you, the people in our community, and that's who we're really looking for in our stories.
Okay.
Because that's how we think it'll, affect, our viewers the most.
And the community, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I like how much you're an old pro at this point because you looked right at the camera when you said
Yeah.
That's very impressive. Because you haven't been doing this that long, right?
No, just over 10 months now.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow, I can't believe it's been that long. You're doing a great job for 10 months. So we mentioned what drives you each day, but when you watch that broadcast at 10 o'clock, what goals do you have for that final product?
Honestly, the biggest thing for me is I want it to be as polished as it possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
I think, something at least for me is, at the end, I got to put my name on it at the end of every single thing that I do. And I know I want to be proud of it, and I want to make sure that the people who are watching it, feel like someone put effort and care into what they're watching.
Of course. Do you like the interview side of things?
Absolutely. That's my favorite part.
Yeah. Isn't it kind of interesting? Because I do interviews a lot different than how you guys do. Because you've got man on the street. You have people, that maybe had something happen in their life. They're not used to being in front of the camera. So yours is stressful. I normally have people used to being in front of a microphone at the very least.
Right.
So when you look back at your interviews, do you have, and I'm going to ask you this about the package as well, but do you have a favorite interview?
Do I have a favorite interview? I have a couple of
memorable.
Yeah, memorable. Certainly memorable. And I have a couple of ones that I thought were really strong. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Oh, you're not gonna tell us.
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay.
Well, so I know, one that wasn't a full interview, but I remember when we had the NASCAR event up at Watkins. Talking to fans the day before was really really fun. And then a couple of other interviews. I got to interview a professor up at Cornell who just made a new grape variant. And he was super excited for winemaking.
Yeah.
And he was super excited about it, and I learned a lot about that process. And, it's something cool about this job is learning so much about things that you didn't ever expect to learn about.
Well, and that's a great point because I think a good interviewer is trying to learn, right? Because if you're interviewing somebody and it's just right. They're trying to get through it. But if you actually can build on the topic or add on to it maybe as they go, I kind of like that part of the interview. You don't want to walk away saying, well, that was... what did I learn, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, that kind of helps build and make the story as well. If you just sit there and kind of your way through it, you're never going
to... I almost just said
be able to make a good story.
What's your favorite story that you've done?
Oh, man, my favorite story that I've done. There's a lot. There's definitely a lot. I've had a lot of fun at this job.
Yeah.
The NASCAR ones were really just fun because that was a really memorable experience for me. It was really exciting being able to go. And
you've never been there before, I
No, I've never been to the NASCAR race.
It's an experience, isn't it?
Yeah. Meeting the professional drivers and talking to them afterwards was really cool as well.
Yeah.
There was one story we did up over in Hornell. There was a BOCES program that were students building houses for the community. And I learned a lot about that, and I thought it was a really kind of cool idea.
Yeah.
For people to...
It's funny you say that, and I'm not just saying this because maybe I've told you this before, but before I even started working here, I ran into the mayor of Hornell, John Buckley, and I was telling him how much I enjoyed that newscast because I had saw it just a couple days before, but I had no idea that was in our backyard. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's Hornell, but still our backyard. This reaches Hornell.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was a good story. See, kudos months later. Just before we go, you're young in the business, you're learning, you're doing a great job, like I keep saying, but what would you say to a young person watching? What kind of tips would you offer them if they want to get into media or into journalism?
I'd say one thing you definitely got to keep in mind is it's a pretty fast-paced thing, and, part of it is there's a lot of rejection as well, where people don't want to talk to you or people don't want to be on camera or tell you things or give you information, and you kind of just got to work through that. There's a lot going on. There's always going to be something that you can kind of pivot to or move from, and you just got to kind of stay positive and keep moving.
Yeah, you have to think on your feet in
Absolutely.
this job. How do you handle the rejection when people say, no, I don't want to be on camera? Because you might be depending on them for a better story. You're just used to it? Or? Yeah.
Absolutely. That is definitely something that, we try to get people to talk to us, and when they say no, especially if we're relying on them, it's like it definitely impacts the story a little bit. But you just got to think of alternate ways or alternate people that you can talk to that can help tell that story.
You almost become a salesperson in a way. Absolutely. Where it's you can't assume the sale. You have to know that there's going to be people that are going to say no matter what.
Absolutely.
I mean, even on this show, even though it's a new show, I've had people that have not only turned us down for an interview, but did not like the fact of being on camera. Mm-hmm. But if you're not used to being on camera, which I guess I really wasn't either, but I just try to zone it out.
Yeah.
Forget that it's there.
Well, that's always what we try to tell people is, don't focus on the camera. Look at us. Camera's off to the side. We're just having a conversation, you and me.
Well, and that's exactly what we're doing right now, Josh. I appreciate that. Just before we go, what would you tell people that maybe never tuned into Big Fox News at 10, what they should know, what they should expect, and maybe just put your pitch on why they should watch you?
I think Big Fox is a little different and really exciting news for this area. I think the thing that makes us stand out the most is that we want to talk to the community. We want to talk to you. Mm-hmm. We want to talk to the people. I don't think that some of the other media outlets in this area, focus as much on the community and the people in this community as much as we do.
And that is something that when I watch your broadcast, it is, and that's what we've tried to do on this program too, to make it a home for community, right? Why wouldn't you? This is a beautiful place we live in. Absolutely. We want everybody to be happy. Well, Josh, thanks again for being on the program. Do you want to, maybe I can't ask you this, maybe you'll get in trouble. Do you want to move on to bigger markets? Do you want to stay in news? What's your thoughts? You don't have to give any away that you're not supposed to. This is not a gotcha question.
Sure.
But let me word it different so you don't get in any kind of trouble. Do you see yourself staying in news no matter where that may be?
I'd like to definitely stay in news for a little while longer.
Yeah.
I think just news is a really good place to get experience in this kind of world, especially with the fast-paced moving kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I think I would tend to lean maybe more towards a producer or production role coming up.
That makes sense.
But I'm happy where I am at the moment.
And I keep saying last question. When you watch other broadcast news, maybe it's national, do you tweak it a lot or like watch it with a watchful eye and say what's right, what's wrong, how you do it different?
A little bit. I'm definitely curious. I'm always paying attention to how people say things. Is mainly the thing I try to pick up on. Yeah. Is just learning. It's a lot of learning. There's always something you can learn in this business, and so I am definitely picking up on things that people do, trying to pick up and add to my own abilities.
So you're not jaded and you go, they could have done that better.
No, definitely not. No.
Good. Josh, thanks so much for being on the program.
Thanks for having me, Frank. I appreciate it.
Anytime. We'll be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. That again, our contact information. I mention it because we've been receiving a lot of great messages today. This is the kind of community that we've been talking about, the back and forth and the amazing conversations, which ties us in to this. Let me double check. There we go. My wife and I had an opportunity to catch last night's performance of The Little Mermaid. It was fantastic. We both highly recommend everyone who has a chance to go see it. Well, I'm glad we had that fun interview in the week with some of the cast, and it sounds like it's an amazing production. 40-some kids, if I recall. So here's information. If you are still interested, there's a performance tonight, Saturday, and Sunday, and that's the website to go to get tickets. I was told, I believe live during the interview or maybe off the air, that you can get tickets at the door, but there's no guarantee it won't be sold out. So if you can, reserve your tickets online. Otherwise, show up the night or afternoon of the performance and enjoy what sounds like an amazing show. All right. Just to wrap up our discussion on New York State, Douglas Murray writes a piece for the New York Post because, again, I can't find, which makes me think there's nothing in there, but find out about enforcement against illegal pot places in New York State. And makes me think it's probably not in there if we haven't heard anything about it yet, but it is a little early. It was just released last night. We're learning what's in it because it's the least transparent process that you can imagine. Very unfair to us residents of New York State. But what Douglas Murray writes is, we know that the governor tried to ban menthol cigarettes. Now is kind of gearing up to maybe ban all tobacco products outright. And Douglas Murray asks a question. You may be in favor of that, you may be not. But here is something I cannot understand. If the sale of tobacco products is to be made illegal, What are New Yorkers meant to mix with their recently legalized marijuana? What a weird set of priorities, yet in some ways it is typical. I would agree. You look at the numbers at this. Bill de Blasio, back when he was first pushing it, if you remember Mayor de Blasio back in 2018, he said, we have a chance to create a brand new industry that would lift up everyday New Yorkers. Really? Said Douglas Murray. Most New Yorkers who have benefited from the law change seem pretty despondent to me. And the businesses surrounding it are probably not lifted up. And Governor Cuomo told us that legalization of pot could create somewhere between 30,000 and 60,000 new jobs in the city, with up to $350 million each year in tax revenue. But I wonder how many people have lost their jobs due to the law change and how many people are making themselves unemployable. Interesting. And finally, New York City Sheriff Anthony Miranda admitted that there are around 1,400 illegal pot shops in the city. That's just the city. Never mind upstate. And Forbes recently reported that the illicit drug market in the state is actually going to cost the state $2.6 billion in tax revenues over the next 7 years. But they're going to keep pushing it. They're going to keep telling us it's about equity. But again, they created a black market like they're doing for tobacco products. Before we take another short break, let's completely change the topic. We're going to go to some Fed level stuff. Just something to keep in mind with this article. This coming from Americans for Tax Reform. You see the headline there on your screen. We're hiring special agents now, reads the IRS website, in all caps, mind you. And just to add a little more excitement, I guess, an exclamation point at the end. Click here to apply today. Under the major duties section of the job description, applicants are notified they must, and this is a quote, must be willing to use force up to and including the use of deadly force, end quote. I bet you're really wishing you didn't file that extension right now, or that you remembered to. I mean, this is unbelievable. The agency is seeking to hire at least 360 armed agents. And just, if you're curious, if you're looking for new work, 13 sites in each of Florida and New York. Yeah, this raises a lot of concerns. That's from Americans for Tax Reform. Raises some ultimate red flags. Okay, we're going to talk about the presidential race when we come back. I know you're saying it's not till November. Well, it's starting to heat up, and I think that goes without saying. So we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Is it just me, or is this show moving very, very quickly? Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting from the Hesselson studio. I'm not going to read the whole text, but I thought it was a very good point when we talk about what some of these tricks that New York State tries to use to get some money coming in and businesses coming in. And I remember this being a major issue where Governor Cuomo did it a lot, sending out these ads paid for by taxpayers, trying to lure, encourage businesses to come to New York State, promising them amazing opportunities. You know, no taxes for 10 years. We're going to help you in all these different ways. But what happens? Of course, when that 10 years runs up, or whatever the stipulation is, they're gone. Because then they get the actual tax bills and they say, why would anybody stay here? So instead of helping small businesses, which they are now penalizing, essentially, instead of helping with the minimum wage increase, I should have been specific on that, instead of hurting small businesses, why don't we maybe offer them incentives? Instead of Hollywood, why don't we offer small businesses incentives? But instead, as the other, I believe it was somebody else who texted earlier said, we just keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, the definition of insanity. Now, like I said, we are going to talk about the presidential race. So let's get kick right off with that, and I will, as I look for the exact article here. That's how you can contact me if you'd like to weigh in on this. We do have to take a short break. I got to warn you, but I do want to get to the numbers at first. This coming from Gallup. Joe Biden has slipped to his lowest point in his presidency, 37% approval. This, according to Gallup. I know I say this a lot. I'm not the biggest fan of polls, but I still think it's something to observe. Like we talked about yesterday with Joe Sempolinski, you have to look at all the numbers to get a better picture of where the bias is. Because you can kind of read the bias in this, because listen to this. Meanwhile, 19% say the economy is getting better and 75% worse. Doesn't it seem like the headline should be 75% believe the economy is getting worse? Can you get 75% of people to agree on anything? Well, in this case, you can under the Biden administration, and the plans and just the constant spending, and it's not sustainable, and that's why we have inflation. That's why you're worried about being able to pay your bills. That's why you're worried and you get sick when you go to the grocery store because of the cost. I already have to take a break. But 75% say it's worse. The economy is getting worse. Wow. And it's going to be, I don't know. I mean, we know the media's got to cover for the president on everything they can, even in the way that I believe was written. Let's not get on a tangent. I'm just about to go on a tangent, but I do have to take another short break. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We're back. Let's wrap things up here. I don't know if you saw the piece from the New York Post, but others have been reporting on it. And before we went to break, we're talking about the media bias, making sure to play in favor to President Biden and go against any of the candidates, essentially, that will be running on the Republican ticket. Biden couldn't remember his recent visit to Ireland at a White House event yesterday. He actually ended up getting help from a kid because it was Take Your Child to Work Day. The last country I've traveled, I'm trying to think of the last one I was. I've met with 89 heads of state so far, so trying to think where was the last place I was is hard to keep track. A child shouted out, Ireland. He said, oh yeah, that's right, Ireland. Now, I only mention this because we saw the cheat sheet that he had when he was being asked by reporters, and essentially having the full, not only his full response, but having the full question from reporters. But don't worry, CNN wants you to know there's nothing special about this. Now, I would ask, do you believe this article would ever come from CNN? Oh, I didn't even put it up on the screen. Would this article ever come from CNN if it were President Trump? Do you remember with President Trump at the time, I might have popped it on the screen. They made him take a cognitive test. And he did. Now, when Nikki Haley suggests anybody over 75 should maybe take a cognitive test if they're running for president, they're saying it's ageism. You know it. So the CNN running a piece, the secret of the presidential cue card, nothing to see here. Now, what they describe is essentially something that would just give you the who, what, when, where, and why. That's not what we saw from President Biden. Listen to this, just again, trying to downplay this controversy. The Los Angeles Times reporter question did turn out to be on basically a similar issue to the one predicted on the Biden's card. So they're suggesting it was all just, his staff had a lucky guess about exactly what she was going to ask about. The coverage is going to get very interesting, folks, between now and November. But I'm out of time. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a fun, safe weekend. I hope you can make it out to Corning Painted Post High School for their production. As always, before we go, you can contact me over the weekend. I would love to hear from you. Again, have a great weekend, and we'll be back, 7 a.m. on Monday. I'm looking forward to it already. See you then.